The MLB trade deadline is overrated. There. I said it. That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode as football season starts, as the basketball offseason is fully heating up. We're going to talk about baseball, the trade deadline, and the path to the playoffs. Without further ado, let's get into it. We're back. Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast here. It's been a while, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching or listening. I've been seeing views come through even when I haven't been uploading, and it's been a while, right? It's been a couple months since we've uploaded on this platform, whether it's via the podcast or the YouTube. I thank you for your viewership, your support, your listenership throughout this whole experience of Lots of Thoughts dating back till 2020. I know there was a big gap here, just a bit in my personal life before we do all the housekeeping, the socials, and that garb. Been moving around a little bit, bought a house. So this room is going to be a dedicated office, partially for work, obviously, but partially for Lots of Thoughts. And I'm excited for that. You can see in the background, I'm going to get the sports set up here, hopefully a little better than the last one, the last background I had. Nonetheless, thank you for all your support on Lots of Thoughts. If you're not already subscribed on YouTube, we're at Lots of Thoughts Sports on YouTube. YouTube has switched over to to usernames instead of channel names. So it's at Lots of Thoughts Sports. Same thing on Instagram. Same thing on Threads. Same thing on TikTok at Lots of Thoughts Sports. On Twitter, we're at LOT Sports Pod, or X. I'm sorry. X, we're at LOT Sports Pod. You can follow us over there, although least active on that platform. You can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysite.com. There you can access the podcast, the newsletter, the website. Well, that's obvious. Podcast, the newsletter, the socials, whatever you want to access, lotsofthoughts.godaddysite.com. It's been a while, and I don't even remember what our last episode was about, but I do want to say that I'm hoping to be uploading more often on this channel, and so whenever I'm impassioned about sports, it's fun to get on this platform and talk about it, and that's what we're going to do today. The MLB trade deadline passed, and I don't have any notes today. I'm kind of hoping that this ends up sort of a deeper dive into my mindset as a sports fan, whether you agree with me or not. I hope that you enjoy that as a listen today. So, with any trade deadline, right, there's teams that come in with the expectation of competing. So they buy, right? Buyers. Teams that come in with the expectation of continuing the rebuild. Sellers. And then there's teams in the middle, and they either pick a direction or they sit and wait. And those that sit and wait, I think, make the biggest mistake. Now, that's not to say that teams doing one or the other couldn't make a mistake, right? Teams who should be selling may buy, and that may be their mistake, and vice versa. Vice versa doesn't happen too often because teams don't want to intentionally miss the playoffs unless they feel like it's necessary to build up toward the future. But nonetheless, we saw several contending teams buy that I didn't think would be buyers. One of which was the Los Angeles Angels. And I have to say, as a New York Yankees fan, you can see that on the logo here on my t-shirt. I was hoping selfishly Shohei Ohtani moved in this approaching this trade deadline, just because I'd like to see him on a playoff team. And whether that's my team, which would be a little bit of a clunky fit, or a team like the Dodgers, or the Giants, or the Mariners. Well, I don't know if the Mariners are going to make the playoffs, but whoever that is. And the Angels went on a little bit of a hot streak. They decided to keep Ohtani. They make way too much money off of him and the advertisements they can sell to Japanese companies because of the increase in viewership across East Asia. And they're going for it, right? They traded for Randall Grichuk. They traded for CJ Cron, the outfielder and first baseman of the Colorado Rockies. And they traded for Lucas Giolito, the starting pitcher from the White Sox. And I applaud the Angels in a way, even if they don't have a high chance of making it, for going for it when they have two of the game's best players in their prime. Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, the best position player in baseball, in my opinion, is Mike Trout when he's healthy. And the best overall player, in my opinion, when he's healthy, is Shohei Ohtani. the ability to be an elite hitter and a borderline to elite pitcher. I think he is an elite pitcher, but you could debate that fact, I guess. But he's at worst a very, very, very good pitcher. And so a team like them loading up and going for it on the last year of Shohei's deal, I don't hate it. As much as I wish Shohei Ohtani would have been traded, and I love watching him and I want to see him on the biggest stage, I do respect them for going for it. And Shohei wants to be on that stage because you saw how he performed in the World Baseball Classic against his teammate Mike Trout in the closing moments. He lives for that big moment. And I hope he gets that, not at the expense of the Yankees, obviously, but at the expense of any other team. I hope he gets that big moment. I applaud them for going for it, even if they were just a little bit out. And there's obviously teams that are going for it that should be, right? The Dodgers are trading for pieces. Now, the pieces that they traded for, I don't love. I obviously think Lance Lynn was a decent addition. Joe Kelly, returning to Dodger Blue, I think could help them. But Ahmed Rosario and Kike Hernandez are two of the worst qualified hitters in Major League Baseball. And honestly, not that great defenders either. I mean, Rosario's okay, but Hernandez has been awful at shortstop this year. He can play center decently well, second decently well. I don't know where his fit with the Dodgers is. Probably the outfield, I'd imagine. But nonetheless, they're borderline leading the division, if not leading the division. I haven't checked the standings in quite a while of the NL West, but they're right there, and so they're going for it, and I respect that. The Atlanta Braves adding pieces, the Baltimore Orioles adding pieces, these bona fide playoff teams, the Tampa Bay Rays adding pieces. You respect them for going for it. You respect them for adding pieces. On the flip side of this whole decision, I respect teams who make a profound stance that they're not going for it, that listen to offers, that take the right offers, that lead them to a better future next year or the year after. And there were obviously going to be a few sellers here, whether it be the White Sox, right? That the White Sox were obviously going to sell. I thought they should have sold more. I thought Tim Anderson should have been out the door, but they get rid of Lance Lynn, Lucas Giolito, Joe Kelly, Berger. What's his first name? Nate Berger? I can never remember. Who else did they trade? I feel like they traded another outfielder. They made quite a few moves. The Mariners traded Paul Sewald. They traded AJ Pollock. They traded a few players. Who else am I thinking that sold? That were I shouldn't say were obviously sellers, but teams that really should have been selling. The Kansas City Royals traded a few pieces. But there are teams that are kind of on the borderline that if they're not going to have a chance, I really respect the decision to sell because I don't think it's the easiest one. And the New York Mets are one of those teams, right? The Mets went for it. They did. And Steve Cohen bought the team. He said he wanted to make a championship team in 3 to 5 years. And I think he realized how difficult that is because he's sitting as we currently speak with the league's highest payroll. And that's his flexibility. That's his strength. And he wanted to rebuild the farm system while spending to compete, and his money couldn't keep up. And even though they had the league's highest payroll, their offense kind of floundered, right? Guys took a step back, whether it was Nemo or McNeil or frankly, Alonso took a step back in respect to his overall contact numbers. Lindor took a step back in that same regard. Pieces that they thought would complement the main guys like Daniel Vogelbach didn't work out. Luis Guillorme, right? These guys just didn't hit where they needed them to. Thomas Nito, you could go down the line. And even though there were bright spots, whether it was Francisco Alvarez, whether it was Justin Verlander refinding himself, whether it was Kodai Senga coming over from Japan, whether it was from David Robertson out of the bullpen, at the end of the day, they had a really low chance to make the playoffs. And so they sold. And you have to respect them for that, right? They traded David Robertson to the Marlins. They traded Max Scherzer to the Rangers. They traded Justin Verlander to the Astros. They traded Mark Canha to the Milwaukee Brewers. Is that all? I think that's it that they sold off. They might have traded another reliever or two. They traded away major pieces. They paid those players salaries on the new teams to get better prospects in return, and they significantly boosted the feeling their rankings have significantly jumped up. over the course of the last few weeks, and rightfully so. They've added major talent, whether it's the pieces from the Astros. I think were very highly touted prospects. Ronald Acuna's younger brother, Luis Angel Acuna, was added to the prospect system. They got these blue chip, I shouldn't say blue chip prospects, but they got very highly rated prospects for guys that are not going to help them compete this year because they're not going to make the playoffs. And I respect that. And in a way, they sacrifice next year because guys like Justin Verlander, who have another year left on their deal and are still pitching at a high level, trading them away, that compromises next year. But Steve Cohen has come out and said, we're looking to compete in probably 2025 or 2026. And I respect them for taking that decision and going for it. It's always a struggle when a team doesn't know what they're doing. And we saw this, to bring up the Angels again, we saw this from the Angels the past few years where they had Ohtani, they had Trout, but they didn't have the pieces they needed to get over the hump. And I think that's the Yankees this year. The Yankees feel like a team who could have gone either way and you would have respected it. They could have sold and played for next year, right? They could have gotten rid of impending free agents, Harrison Bader, Wandy Peralta, I could say a Kiner Falefa, whoever that may be. And sold pieces, not long-term pieces, but pieces that would have left after this year, sacrificed the playoffs this year, called up a few prospects, whether that's Everson Pereira, whether that's keeping Oswald Peraza up, whether that's giving Estevan Florial another chance at the major league level. I don't know. But nonetheless, making that decision to go out and sacrifice this year for the future years, and you would have respected that. But you could have also seen them compete. You could have seen them buy and go out and make a big deal. Maybe it's Juan Soto. Maybe it's Cody Bellinger. I don't know. I don't know what the scale of that deal is, right? From Juan Soto to Bellinger to Randall Grichuk. I don't know where on the line they could have bought in at, but they could have, and they didn't. So they sat quietly. They made a few back of the bullpen deals. And it's rough because I don't think they expected to be in this place. I think when you look at the Yankees lineup, you, going into this year, expected the bottom of the order to not hit as well as the average bottom of the order, right? You got guys that are very defensive first, whether that's Jose Trevino or Kyle Higashioka at the catching position, whether that's Anthony Volpe, their rookie shortstop, whether that's Harrison Bader out in center field, right? There was always going to be guys that weren't going to be necessarily great hitters. And whoever took the left field job you thought wasn't going to be a great hitter, whether that was Aaron Hicks, whether that was Oswaldo Cabrera, either way. But in order for that to work, in order for a team to compete with the bottom half of the order that's not great, you need the top half of the order to be consistently strong, and you need the pitching to be good. And the pitching has been good. The starting rotation, I mean, there's been some hiccups along the way, right? Carlos Rodon has not had the start to his year that he wanted, especially with the injury, but also with poor performance. Nestor Cortez has been hurt and bad. Luis Severino's been hurt and bad. Domingo Germán's been in and out of situations, good and then perfect game and then awful again. And then now he's going into rehab treatment for his alcoholism, and prayers up to him and his family, even though I don't think he's necessarily a great person. His family doesn't deserve to go through that. But nonetheless, Garrett Cole had been really good. Clark Schmidt had been really good. And they've gotten good enough performances from the outside guys, whether that's Randy Vasquez or whoever. But the pitching has been good. And the bullpen has been elite. The Yankees turn out bullpen arms like it's nothing. But the problem is when the top half of the lineup isn't performing, the whole lineup suffers. And you have guys like DJ LeMahieu hitting 230 with no power. Guys like Josh Donaldson hitting below 200. Gleyber Torres has been good. Aaron Judge has been good, but he's been out for a while with his toe injury. Giancarlo Stanton hasn't been good. Anthony Rizzo's hitting about 150 since May. And now with Rizzo, it's a situation where he's got post-concussion symptoms. And it's been 2 months since he had that concussion. And you don't blame anyone for this, right? You never know what the situation is. You never know if Rizzo doesn't want to get tested for it. He passed concussion protocol after the incident against the Padres where Tatis kind of ran into his head and neck. But nonetheless, that was 2 months of him not reacting well to fastballs, to curveballs, frankly, to anything, and not hitting well. And it's not a surprise because he's essentially been dealing with brain damage for the past 2 months. And so when the top half of the lineup isn't performing outside of Judge, Torres, and Jake Bowers, the whole lineup's going to suffer and the team's going to suffer. So where does that leave them at the trade deadline? That leaves them as a team that either has to hope the top of the lineup figures it out and add one more piece to that top of the lineup, or add one more piece to help get them motivated, or a team that maybe should sell some of their short-term assets and didn't. And it leaves me hesitant, right? If the Yankees don't make the playoffs, I'll feel very bothered by the fact that we didn't sell some of these pieces that we're not going to bring back, right? Harrison Bader's not coming back to the Yankees. I'm so confident of that, even though he's a good defender, even though he's a likable player, a New York guy, I'm so confident the Yankees aren't going to re-sign him because he's a defensive first outfielder when the Yankees need lineup prowess. And Kiner has been a valuable utility man, but those grow on trees, frankly. Maybe not as good as he's been, but nonetheless, Wandy Peralta, like I mentioned, the team churns out bullpen arms, whether it's Clay Holmes or Jonathan Loizaga or Albert Abreu, Ian Hamilton, Ron Marinaccio. I mean, you could go down the list of guys that they just throw into spots and perform well. And Luis Severino is another one. I doubt they re-sign Luis Severino between all the off-field issues they've had with, him debating how he wants to rehab, whatever the deal is. I think that the Yankees didn't have quite enough of a direction one way or the other, and that could bite them in the butt. But you never know. I'm not paid to make these decisions, right? Brian Cashman's paid to make these decisions, or whoever else on any other team. I just say the trade deadline is overrated not because my team didn't do anything. Maybe it's partially that, but more or less, I feel like teams should buy when they have a solid chance. And I applaud the Angels, even though they have not a huge percentage chance to make it. I think giving up, I'm a person who believes that giving up prospect capital is worth it. Most prospects do not pan out. It's really true. You look at the amount of prospects that have panned out for teams outside of the Atlanta Braves. Let's take them out of this scenario. What team has 2 to 3 really good young position players they developed in the last 10 years? It's hard to come up with a team, right? You go across the league, there's been situations where players, move from one place to the other, a coach unlocks something and they succeed, or there's players that are bought in free agency, or players that are traded, right? There's very few prospects that start from the ground up, make their way to the major league level, and are very good young players for their team that make that first 6-year contract valuable enough to keep around and not trade for, a Justin Verlander, for example, to add to the Houston Astros chance at repeating, or trade for Aaron Savale to add to the Tampa Bay rotation to have a chance at competing, or, you could go down the line. And so at the end of the day, the right decision almost always feels like competing and feels like spending if you have a chance at it, just because the prospect capital that you're giving up probably won't bite you in the butt. And that's not to say that it won't, because there's been situations, right? What's a good example? Fernando Tatis Jr. was traded for James Shields, right? And obviously that benefits the Padres a lot more, but you could go on and on about trades, whether it's the prospects the Orioles got for Manny Machado, whether it's the prospects the A's got for their entire team. You could go down the list of prospects that were given up that just never panned out. And so when it comes to the trade deadline, it always feels like it's less of a bidding war and more of a staring contest. And that's why I feel it's almost an overrated aspect of the MLB season, even though it could be exciting. it ends up being a situation where players don't necessarily fly off the shelves like you want them to, and teams don't necessarily stick to conviction as much as you want them to, outside of a few, case examples that we've talked about today. But even though it's not as exciting as maybe the NBA trade deadline, which is absolutely insane, I think nonetheless it is a momentous area of this season. And I wish it came a little later in the season, just selfishly as a Yankees fan. But nonetheless, I think it's an aspect of our sport that's still fun to talk about, even if it's not as action packed as it really could be. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. There'll hopefully be more episodes on the way. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you very much for watching on YouTube. If you are watching, hit that subscribe button, click the like button. It lets me know that you like this type of content, and it suggests it to new viewers who are scrolling through the algorithm. So please do that. If you're watching, if you're listening on an audio platform, please head over to YouTube and hit subscribe. Rate us 5 stars on the audio platform as well. I'd really appreciate that. Follow us on Instagram at Lots of Thoughts Sports, on Twitter at LOT Sports Pod, on TikTok at Lots of Thoughts Sports. You can visit the website lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com for all that info and more about the Lots of Thoughts Sports Network. Thank you very much for watching or listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day.